Hi, everybody. Welcome to Office Hours, where we've been here answering your media and tech-related production questions every single day since March 25th of 2020. Courtney Gooden in Los Angeles, California is our reader today. So, Courtney, what do we got?
All right, Bill. First up is coming in from Malaysia. Someone named Seth asks, who should be providing the cables from the camera to the video switcher in a live multi-camera event? The vendor providing the camera or the vendor who is in charge of the multi-cam switcher?
Ronnie Hofsoy is going to start us off here. Ronnie?
Yeah, so the industry default would be to provide the cables that you need going into, for instance, a commonly known patch point. So if there is a patch panel at the venue or at the production, you should normally provide the cables going from the cameras to the patch point, whereas the people in charge of the vision mixers, etc., would provide cables going from that agreed upon patch point into their own equipment. In smaller production, it's normal to just agree upon this in the contract or when you are talking with each other and just agree who is delivering the cables. And if this is a big production, you normally have a camera chain, which consists of the camera and all the controls of the camera, power, etc. And you probably have some kind of module on that camera, if it's fiber or triax or whatever baseband. You are going with that special cable to the opposite box at the truck or at the front of house where this image switching is taking place, and then converted into a normal signal using the CCU or whatever you are connecting to that end of the camera chain. So that is seen as a total camera chain. In smaller production, again, it all depends on what you agree upon. We always have some extra cables if we provide the switchers. We also have a lot of extra cables if we're providing the camera. So I would say it depends.
Courtney, your thoughts on this?
I concur with the it depends. Yeah, it does depend on sometimes it's the same person providing the camera and the multicam switcher. So in that case, yes, they would be providing the cable. I usually, if I'm providing something that hooks into a switching situation like a mixer or a camera, I usually bring about 100 feet of cable with me and leave it up to either the venue or the person providing the multicam switcher or the switching, that infrastructure to get further than 100 feet. So that would probably take me back to the access point or connection point, as Ronnie was talking about. And typically, and sometimes that's provided by the venue. Sometimes venues like sports stadiums are equipped with fiber links to different parts of the stadium, or if you're in a stage situation like a theater, sometimes they will have connection points from the projection booth to the stage. Tie lines. Sometimes they don't work. So don't necessarily rely on them, because in a lot of older venues, they were originally set up for baseband video and they can't handle SDI video. So be prepared to run your own cable if you haven't agreed ahead of time that they will be providing a link to your camera position.
Next question.
Sorry, had a little trouble clicking there. The next one comes in from Flowery Branch, Georgia. Sounds like a lovely place. Abe Barrera asks, Bill, how about an office hour meetup at Comic-Con in San Diego?
You know, Abe, until I saw your question, I don't know why, but I had compartmentalized that my Comic-Con life and my office hours life were two totally separate things. I enjoy talking about them both, but I never really considered getting them together in any way. I'd be more than happy to figure out a place and a time and say anybody wants to show up from this audience. I never think of this audience as actually, I don't know why, but I just never considered that. But sure. I do have a cutout email that I use, so maybe at some point I'll see if I can scramble something together and post it in a couple of places. So anybody who's interested in figuring out a time to go have a cup of coffee or something like that and say hello, sure, why not? I'm all for it. Next question.
Coming in from Alexander Knight in Port Coquitlam, British Columbia, Canada. He says, when ISO recording a Blackmagic ATEM Extreme, the switcher adds its own timecode. Is there any benefit to sending my camera's own timecode via the HDMI port in addition to this?
Ronnie Hofsoy is going to help you out here. Ronnie?
No, I've never done that. The times I've been using timecode from cameras is where I do the recording on the camera itself. And when you synchronize that recording with the ones that are being done, the multicam from the switcher, you can decide what timecode you need to use. Normally, the camera is free running and kind of pointless to use anyway, in my examples. But I'm sure there are good reasons to why you should have a camera going into the switcher. I'm thinking that is important on bigger production where you also have synced everything and you maybe have a host clock that is going out to all the items, which then again needs more expensive cameras with ref sync and ref signals in and time code inputs. So I'm thinking, no, for easy use, it's not important.
Courtney Gooden.
Yeah, I think it's more of it depends. It depends on if you're recording uncompressed video in your cameras, on your camera's cards, local cards, in addition to the ISO recordings that the ATEM is doing. And it depends on whether you're going to use those ISO recordings for editing or if you're going to transcode the files from the original cameras to sync them up in the editing process. If you're going to do that, then I would suggest jam syncing if your cameras allow this. It has to be a professional camera that has a timecode input on it so that you can jam sync the cameras to a common timecode base. And hopefully it'll be the same timecode base that the ATEM is using to generate those H.264 proxies that it's recording on its hard drive for the ATEM Extreme. Remember, it records an H.264. I don't think it does an H.265. I don't have an Extreme, so let me know if I'm wrong here. But it's not an uncompressed a version of the file. So if you want to maintain higher resolution or higher quality, if you're going to do any type of compositing in post, you probably want access to those uncompressed raw files in the camera. So you're probably going to want to jam sync your cameras so they all have a common time code, so then you can build your edit from the rough cut at the very end.
Don't forget, we're always taking your questions. That's how this show is run. You can ask questions, chat about those questions, and even vote on them in Mukana. That's our live Q&A system. If you go to officehours.global/join, you can fill out a little simple form there. We'll send you an email within a day or two, and once you've done that, you can ask, vote on, and discuss the show's questions in real time. There's a nice community of folks in the back end, not the back end, but in Mukana, who are constantly here every day that we're doing the show, and there's actually a lot of extra information that's very valuable contained in the show chat every day. So join it by getting to officehours.global/join. All right, next question.
Next one comes in from Jack Cannon in Phoenix, Arizona. Jack asks, filming on a sailboat, what creative solutions have you used to get shots? We have a gimbal, a shoulder rig, a handheld, and 3 action cams.
Wow, sounds like you're well equipped. Ronnie Hofsoy, what are your suggestions?
Yeah, just make sure you don't lose that into the water, because if it's get into the water and you are use tethers, that is what I was coming to. And make sure you are safe, of course, all the time. Don't do dangerous stuff on board, especially on sailboats where there are wires and ropes swinging everywhere. So the security is really, so be careful with everything you do. It sounds like you have a good starting point with action cams. DJI, for instance, have these action cams where you can have horizon stabilized inside the camera. Maybe not every camera does that as well as the DJI ones. So depending on what type of camera you are using, maybe it's better to just shoot plain normal without stabilization and do the stabilization in post-production. I guess this is not a live production. or to have more options in the post-production is to shoot high frame rate so that you can slow down footage and have the waves breaking or the water coming in front of the bow of the boat or dolphins, whatever. You can have that slowed down to slow motion. It makes everything a little bit more cinematic. Of course, use ND filters to have the correct frame rate, so you don't have to compensate with shutters to restrict the amount of light coming into these action cams. So if you have a controlled environment where you can control or plan a little bit ahead, choose the right ND filter for the correct frame rates, and you will be good on that one. And of course, you don't seem to use drones, which is a good idea because drones on sailboats could be a nightmare. Ask me how I know. It could be costly, but also drones have a really good gimbal. So in a pinch, you can use the camera on the drone as a stabilized camera as well. And of course, if budget is no limit, you don't say what type of gimbal, but the gold standard nowadays is the Ronin 4D, which is amazing. I've used the previous model, and just being able to test it will change your life forever, also on board a sailboat.
Courtney Gooden.
Yeah, Ronnie covered it very comprehensively. I'd say the image stabilization is important, especially for that handheld camera. The gimbal will self-stabilize. I don't know about your shoulder rig and your handheld. Handheld occasionally has a tendency, since you're holding it, to not keep the horizon stable unless you have some type of automatic motion, control, automatic stabilization built into the camera, optical image stabilization of some sort. But a lot of times, even the optical image stabilization doesn't do pitch and roll. It'll only do up, down, left, right. So be aware of that. Also, depends on whether you're sailing on a lake, freshwater lake, or in the ocean. If you're in the ocean, you might think about protecting the action cams are okay because most of them are waterproof these days, but that salt spray can be very corrosive if it gets into electronics. So you might want to protect your shoulder rig and handheld in some type of waterproof enclosure or bag or something to protect it from taking a hit from that salt spray, because it'll really shorten the life of a camera if you get salt water on it.
Yeah, my perspective is just going to be from having a couple of things. I edited a piece done at the highest level of sailboating, which was the America's Cup. And the one thing that I got from editing that piece was know where everybody is and what's going on. Because when they tack, that boom swings across the boat, and it can happen very quickly. And it is a ballet. Those people know exactly what they're doing, and getting in their way is not good. Now, on the small scale, I don't know, you may be just on a sailboat on Sorrel Lake or something like that. I know you're in Phoenix area. Then everybody can communicate, and you know what's kind of going on at every moment. But a little understanding, if I was going to do it for the first time again, I would have somebody take me out on the path beforehand to just get an idea of what the boat protocol is going to be. How large the boat is. Is there room for me to move fore and aft aside from the cabin? Is there a walkway there that's clear? Or are we all in a pontoon kind of boat and you just have to figure out how to navigate yourself around? You'll get an idea of where the best shots will come from and that kind of thing. You're talking about multiple cameras, so I'm assuming it has to be a relatively large boat, or you're doing some kind of training about how to operate this type of boat. In any case, or maybe you're doing something narrative on there. That's fun too. Just plan like everything else. A scene survey, a location survey for the boat is something I would almost always want to do, because I always come up with an idea about, if I just put a camera a third of the way up the mast over there, that'll be a great shot of the pilot and the rest of that. So those kind of things. Ronnie, you had some more thoughts?
Yeah, just when you are placing your equipment in your bags or taking them on board, and you get a dedicated place where you can have all your chargers and batteries, etc., make sure they are all really, really secured, because when the boat is tilting all the times, right and left, starboard, or and everything goes to the You should be not thinking while out filming. You should not be worrying about your equipment that are placed on that or this table inside. So use gaffer's tape or bungee cords or whatever to secure them so that you can film without hesitation and just keep filming.
Yeah, 2 more words, float bags, because if something does go overboard, you want to be able to go and take a net and get it back. That battery overboard is gone very quickly. Next question.
Next one comes in from Richmond, Virginia. Michael Boydnet says, Alex mentioned recently that he does not do auto white balancing for events. Instead, he sets all cameras to the same Kelvin. What is everyone else's method?
We're going to start with Ronnie Hofsaway here.
Yeah, our going tradition is to use something like what is it called, Cinemeter or something on our iPhones. Put a white paper in front of the phone where we are supposed to be having the white balance set. Find out what the normal lights in conference rooms, etc., and different types of venues. They typically have a few old bulbs, which is halogen, 2700 Kelvin, and then they have the newer LED ones, or maybe they have incandescent light bulbs. So you have to find the position or the area where you are measuring this light as correctly as possible. On stage, of course, normally you can control the lights if there are good front lights. So make sure you are measuring and use your phone. I think it's Cinemeter or something. I'll put the link in the chat afterwards. And then find out what the Kelvin is and set all cameras to that Kelvin. And do not ever trust that each camera will have the same perception of white balance in a room. Depending on where those cameras are pointing, it will change all the time, and would be a mess to mix live, and would definitely be a problem afterwards when you have all cameras thinking this is the correct white balance, whereas the other 3 cameras are thinking the total opposite. So have one fixed white balance, and even I would go as far as saying even if it's wrong. So, of course, you would like to have the most correct white balance that is measurable. But even if it's a little bit off, it's much easier to correct all the cameras in post-production if it's similarly wrong.
Yes, I 100% agree with that. I made the mistake of changing white balances through shots, and then you're having to recalibrate every single change. Courtney, your thoughts? Oops, you're muted.
Oops, sorry. Remember to take into account, if the camera has a LUT installed in it or your monitor has a LUT installed in it, you may not be getting what you see on the monitor as what you get. And there may be different LUTs installed in different cameras. So get them to a common LUT if they're common cameras. And remember, each brand of camera can have a different sensor and a different white point on it for its particular sensor. If it's a Bayer filter, if it's a independent 3-chip camera, etc. So bear that in mind. I think if you are going to auto white balance, the best situation is to get all your cameras in the same location, sitting right next to each other, shooting the same white card in the same lighting that the venue is going to be, that you're going to be shooting as the program. And then auto white balance, if that's the only way you have of doing it. If your cameras don't, for example, have the ability to set your white point to be tungsten or daylight or 6,000, 4,500, 2,900, etc. So get them all in the same range and then adjust them to match from there. Once you set them to a common white point, that's probably the best. And remember, lenses can affect your color temperature as well. So just because you set the camera to its preset, 4,700 Kelvin or 6,000 Kelvin, etc., the lens can definitely change your white point depending upon the coatings that are on that lens. So even if you have identical cameras, if they have different lenses on them, they may render things differently. So you will have to color correct in post, or you can then tweak the colors from their white point, set white points, as Ronnie mentioned earlier.
For me, there's one big dividing line, and that is whether I'm shooting EFP or ENG. Those are two traditional things. EFP is electronic field production. That means that you're setting up shots and you're executing shots. That's how field production works. ENG, electronic news gathering, is I'm going out into the world, and whatever shows up in front of me, that's what I'm shooting. In ENG work, you're often following a subject from outside to inside. And so in those kind of circumstances, especially if you're live, you pretty much are constrained to using automated white balance and things like that, because your colors, your light is going to change dramatically scene to scene. And if you're going out live, you don't have time to color correct everything and do a new white balance when you're following a newsmaker, for example, from the inside of a venue to the outside of a venue. Other than that, I prefer to set it because of what Ronnie said at the beginning of this, which is there's nothing worse than having to correct pieces of a scene as opposed to the entire thing was shot with one set of consistent settings. And now I know that if I change scene one and figure out the recipe for getting it the way I want, that's going to affect all the rest of the scenes, and I can just apply it as a batch to everything. It's just way more efficient to do that without changing things in between. Next question.
Next one comes in from Jack Cannon in Phoenix, Arizona. And Jack asks, I have a 2-minute clip for our documentary that was filmed in a noisy restaurant. We had lapel mics, but it was so loud. How would you fix this in pre-production? Oh, we rented half the restaurant, but the space was just loud.
We've been there before, almost all of us, I'm sure. Ronnie Hofsoy, what's your best advice for Jack?
Okay, so bring in an audio guy as soon as possible, or a female. There is obvious reasons to why you should do this, and just scoping a restaurant and looking at the internals and this looks nice. It's seldom enough for an audio person. So a few things that comes to mind. I'm not a professional on this, but of course I've done hundreds or thousands of interviews at different locations. So when I have the time or the budget to scout a location beforehand, I always do a recording with my phone even, just to have a listen to that in my high-quality headsets or speakers in the studio, and look at the recordings. And so I do everything when we are scouting, and we do the scouting primarily at the same time of day and the same weekday, even if that could impact the quality of the things going on. This being a restaurant, of course, I guess there is no budget to just rent out the place as a whole and close the restaurant. That would probably be out of budget in this case. So try to check with the owners if you can use it in the afternoon or after closing time or before closing time. So if you have it before closing time, make sure you do it in the interim session where the pre-production from the chefs in the kitchen is already done and before the restaurant opens. That is normally a time where the personnel is eating their lunch, and before it opens, you have the rush coming in. So that is a good time to do that. Technically, do a recording of the room noise when you are there, so that you in post-production can use that room noise or room audio or a kind of presence audio. Use that to maybe create some noise removal filters and do some noise reduction afterwards. But I would try to fix the problem that is prevalent here, and that is the noise that is going on in the restaurant as you are recording, and try to avoid that for all means. And of course, there are technical things you can do. You can use other types of microphones. You can choose another place in the restaurant, which is kind of better for less noise, etc. So there are a lot of stuff you can do, but scope it beforehand and do it in the same conditions that you would be doing the recording.
Courtney.
Yeah, very accurately covered. I used to have to shoot in restaurants all the time when I was a sound mixer. Documentaries, you don't have as much control, but if you do have control over the restaurant, you might want to look around for things in advance during the scout for refrigerators, because sometimes they'll have an ice machine or something behind the bar that's generating a lot of noise. And most of the people in the restaurant never notice that because the restaurant's full of people talking and making noise. It covers up that. So if you do get into a position where you can control the other people that are in the restaurant, bear in mind that you got to look for noisemakers that exist in the restaurant environment itself. The other thing that makes a lot of noise in a restaurant is clanking utensils on plates. And we used to have to actually bring in things that we would put little rubber bumpers in the bottoms of plates. So when they set them down on a glass table, they don't go clang. And so the little rubber bumpers would let the waiters come in and set down the dishes on the table and not make a huge noise in the middle of the dialogue. So there's those little things that you can look for in addition to, the air conditioning coming on and off can be problematic. If the restaurant is open, of course, you probably don't have control over any of that stuff. But if you are not opening the restaurant, talk to the management and make sure you can get control of that air conditioning, because you don't want half of your interview to have the air conditioning on and half of it to have it off and have to remove that later. Noise removal these days has gotten so good, though, it's become less and less of a problem, except for incidental clanking, loud noises. Somebody drops a tray of dishes in the back, you're going to have those kind of sounds. And then just record a good WALA track, which is just the ambience track of the restaurant of people talking at a low level. And then you can use that to bring it in to even things out if things get uneven in the cutting because of incidental sounds that were going on when you were shooting one part of the interview versus another part of the interview. So when you cut them together, that ambience track can be used to smooth things out, smooth the cuts out so it's not so jarring.
I don't think anybody in this business has not been in this situation, or the first time you're shooting in a restaurant, you're just astonished when you get back to your edit booth and you realize, oh my God, that was incredibly loud in the background. And it sounds like they're just throwing trays of cutlery around in the background. It is insane how noisy things can be. And we don't realize it until you put the headphones on and you're actually responsible for the sound of these things. My favorite comment so far in the chat is Robert Linkram's. I bring my own tablecloth to Taco Bell. It wouldn't surprise me if you're shooting something in a place like that. If you don't really have, if you do it a lot, you will really have those kind of tools to say, listen, I need to put something down so that these sounds are not as prominent as they didn't seem to be in real life. But boy, on the soundtrack, they sure appeared like it. Let's go on to our next question.
The next one comes in from Tromsø, Norway. Wonder who that could be. Ronnie Hofsay has a question. Says, easygoing mobile rig to bring to the show floor. What would be different if you are planning to go live in Zoom or just doing recording? What would be the limiting factors and the important pain points?
Oh, there are lots of pain points. Ronnie, you want to dive in and give us a little more details here?
Yeah, I was thinking we had this pre-show discussion about going to a show, and Bill, you mentioned you're thinking of what to bring, etc.
Yeah.
And we've been doing a lot of different stuff, both with the phones and there's another question coming up: how to improve on the show floor mechanics and equipment you should bring. So I was just triggered to ask this question and try to pick your brain on what your thoughts, Bill, are on this exact thing.
I'll be more than happy to weigh in. Let Courtney go first, because I'm sure he'll have some thoughts, and then I will dive into my experiences over the course of time. Courtney, go ahead.
Battery backup, battery charging, and portable battery charging. Put a big old block battery on your cart that, if it's not powering everything that is not handheld, serves as a point where you can recharge all of the in-camera batteries, or the batteries that go into equipment that has its own unique connection and can't be hooked up to external power because it's either on a gimbal or in some remote location for your sound mixer, etc. So be prepared to replace the battery, especially if you're streaming live, because then you get into a streaming situation where the transmitters of the phone or whatever your device is using to connect to the internet is going to be reaching out, and sometimes every time they reach out to hit that access point, they up the current. And by upping the current, you may have been able to get 5 hours out of your phone in a normal situation, but in a crowded situation where you don't have a near access point, it's going to crank up that transmitter power, and that's going to suck your battery dry in about half the time. So bear that in mind. Take a portable little stool to sit down on every now and then, because that's driven me crazy at a lot of these conventions walking around. There's no place to sit and relax if you're between booths or you just want to take a break and rest. There's no place to sit down, and your feet can start to wear, especially if you're carrying a backpack or something, adding to your normal weight that you carry around on your feet. Wear comfortable shoes, and have a little folding camp stool or something so that you can rest your back, relax your back, especially if you're carrying equipment around that you hold out in front of you. Your muscles can become quite fatigued in holding up that extra weight that you're not used to.
All of these things, there's just so much about conventions that are kind of specific to how they work. I'll talk about a couple of other things that I found. The smaller my rig and the more lightweight my rig is, the better I like it. I'll show you one picture of one tiny corner of the convention center at Comic-Con, and you can just see how dense that crowd is. If you have like a rolling cart or something like that, you will slow down your speed of movement through the convention by a factor of 5 to 1. It is just a lot of people. So are you going to a convention like this where everything is completely packed? And are you going on the display floor, or are you going to be able to work the periphery? For me in Comic-Con, I do both. I spend some time in the aisles of the show floor looking for a specific kind of what's a kind of a magical thing. It could be that little kid in the Batman outfit looking at a huge, beautiful array of Batman costumes or something like that, and the look of wonder on their face is just magic. So I look for those kind of things on the show floor. But then when I'm away from that, I try to find quieter places where I can talk to people and really kind of make pictures. That's what I always call it, making pictures rather than just taking pictures. So that's one of my things. I like small rigs. I am a monopod fan, and I've gotten down to the point where I use my iPhone for almost everything I shoot, and I have the lightest weight, least expensive monopod. It's really just a selfie stick kind of thing. But it'll go up to about 6 feet, a little bit higher than that. And that means that if I literally put it up over the crowd, I can see the shot on my watch, because iPhones and iWatches do communicate with each other. And that's great for that kind of overhead shot. Also, if I'm turning around and there is a little kid down there and I want to get down to his level, I can flip it around and get, without bending over or dropping to my knees constantly, I can literally get the camera down there and see if I can get a nice angle of a small person or something like that. So those are a couple of tricks that I use. The more you want to do, to your point, if you're going to add audio into the mix, that is going to make your rig much more complex than if you're just shooting stills or video MOS, which is the old descriptor from the movie industry about without sound. You're just silent. If you're doing silent, it becomes so much easier. If you need a sound rig, then you're dealing with wireless rigs. You want to get the microphone type itself is important. Microphones have come a long way on our phones and things like that, but to get really good quality sound, you can't get around the laws of physics. So you want to get a microphone element as close to the person you're talking to, or as close to the sound you want to capture as you possibly can. And that usually means you're working with some sort of wireless rig. And so that adds a huge amount of complexity to your rig. And then you get into the people who want to do live webcasting out of things. And in my experience, there is nothing worse in terms of an RF environment or a connectivity environment than a huge conference, because you have maybe 100,000 people around you and they all want to use the bandwidth of the place. They all want to try to get their pictures out to their friends and family. So it's a nightmare getting solid connection points. And we certainly learned that when we do the NAB broadcasts from here at office hours, because even with the best possible equipment, we found severe limitations on the amount we can wirelessly move between a transmission point and a reception point. And there's all sorts of difficulties in terms of getting high-speed access on a show floor. It can be extremely expensive to do a drop for data. If you can do that, then that kind of forms your hub, and you can do some wireless things out from that, but you still sometimes have pretty severe limitations. You can't cover the whole show in real-time broadcast, in my opinion, successfully now, because we've tried to do it. We've tried to do it for 2 or 3 years, and we get some limited success. We also find that there's a lot of pain points. When I was the remote reporter for the Comic-Con, not Comic-Con in this case, the NAB coverage for office hours, literally, if I was standing in one place and I moved 3 feet to the right, my signal would completely drop out back to the main base station. And you'd look up and you go, oh, somebody has an LED display wall, and it's obviously killing my RF between my point of sending the transmission out and the receiving unit. So you really literally got to the place where, okay, I can stand right here and do this stand up, and it's the only place I can stand. And if I move a foot either direction, we're going to lose the signal. So you got to deal with a lot of those kind of things. It's just, all you can really do is figure out how much you're going to try to do, get into the location and figure out what's happening. These things can be very, very challenging. And that's why you usually don't see a lot of even the top people doing, I guess the political conventions are the one exception to the rule, because they know they want to broadcast around the clock. So they use the most sophisticated mesh type, not mesh networks, but they have all sorts of repeaters and all sorts of technology and almost unlimited budgets to get that live signal out of a big convention and out into the world in real time with a low chance of failure. We haven't been able to reproduce that and at something that an individual could buy into yet. Maybe we'll get there someday, but so far not yet. A lot of comments in the chat. Mickey just said difficulty with RF in the office hours is not having an RF coordinator on the crew. Well, that idea of RF coordination is critical. Mickey's exactly right about that, because there has never been a situation I've been in where more people are trying to get chunks of the RF and Wi-Fi bandwidth than a major convention like this. It's as complex as can possibly be. So not for the faint of heart. Ronnie, any other specific questions you have about things you're looking forward to?
No, I'm just approving the message from Bill. I think the big problem is wireless and thus kits that are supposed to be working good should be cabled only. And we've been testing a little bit using, for instance, the DJI Osmo action cameras as webcams, using USB cables going into a Mac. And that is kind of cool. We can do the entire image switching on-prem using the Mac, the MacBook, and applications like Mimo Live. And I think there are so much cool technology coming out these days, and it's really more about what is working. And I totally agree with you on the fact that bringing a big kit with a lot of stuff is just making everything difficult on the floor. And being nimble and lightweight is kind of the other end of the scale and makes everything so much easier. And of course, we all need to think of bringing more and more and more power to the backpack. That is really important.
Yeah, I think those things are all true. And the other thing is that these look, if I show you a picture like this, here's another one at about the same angle. You can see how dense it is. These things are moving, and often there's streams of people moving through here really fast. One of the things I think Alex, with all his experience, did really well was he tried to set up a crew with the person doing the interview. We usually would have 2 or 3 other people there, and then he would designate people to just literally try to keep the crowd from crossing shots. And, if you're on a wired tethered rig, suddenly you're really concerned about that, because somebody who's talking to their friend on the right and moving left can run into your wire and pull your whole rig over. And if you don't have some PAs, production assistants, whose job it is to keep your lines of sight and your cable lines clear of people. That's one of the quickest ways to snap a cable and things like that. So, I heartily thumbs up to everything we said. It's a tough thing. It is fun. I haven't had any more fun on a show floor than trying to do these office hours things because it's a great crew of people. I've learned a ton about doing it. It is exciting from the moment you get up in the morning until you fall asleep exhausted to get ready to do the next day. But it's a lot of work too. Next question.
Next one comes in from Daytona Beach, Florida, with Harshid Trivedi asking, what would you recommend for a gimbal or figuring a setup for himself using phones as cameras? Open to any audio solutions with this type of setup too, please.
Well, Courtney, you want to dive in and give him some suggestions?
Well, I would suggest for you something like the DJI Osmo Mobile 7P as a gimbal because it gives you the ability to auto-track faces. And that might be important for you to track the people that are in front of you. This 7P has software that runs on it for capturing too. So you can use your phone. It's only about $127. And it will, stabilize your image as well as interface with a lot of tracking software so it can track the people. Now, mounting a phone on a gimbal is going to complicate an audio setup if it is your only audio method of getting audio into the phone. You'll probably have to have a mixer or something with a Bluetooth connection to the phone to get the audio in. So bear that in mind. Connecting cables to the phone in that gimbal might prevent it from auto-tracking and, is going to hinder its method of smoothing out your walking situation. So bear that in mind.
Ronnie Houseaway.
Yeah, if you're going to have some external interface going into the USB or the lightning port of the phone, make sure it's a really, really thin and flexible one. I have the older Osmo Mobile, and the cool thing is the selfie stick functionality, which can prevent it getting on board airplanes. But it makes it really easy to get a kind of high point of view if you need. And sometimes on these show floors, you need to be able to get over and maybe behind the racks. And this extendable selfie stick functionality on the Osmo Mobile are really helpful in getting those impossible shots that are kind of left out if you don't have a solution that is quickly to apply. And I gotta say, this DJI product and the newest version, I really love that new version. I probably should be saving up some money for getting one of those, but it has been really rock steady. It's really, really a good thought of product, and the quality and the build quality is really high. And if I'm going to get a new one, I would definitely think of going with DJI's.
Yeah, DJI has been mine of choice too, and they make really good products and they work really well. If I was shooting video at things like Comic-Con, I would definitely pull out my Osmo and do it that way. I tried. That was the whole purpose of Comic-Con for me, was to try to get my head back into still shooting, because I really missed that when I'm doing mostly video. But these tools can be very, very valuable. And audio, whenever you're working with a gimbal, gimbals are so finely balanced that stringing cables to get audio off them is a problem, or even putting any kind of thing with weight on them changes the balance, because they're so precisely balanced that it's a challenge. So let us know if you solve it. Next question.
Next one comes in from J.J. McKenna in Santa Bonita, California. It says, when recording voice performances for audiobooks, is a dead space preferable to a room with some resonance?
Not really. And in fact, one of the reasons that they reject you in ACX control is if you have zero noise floor behind you. They don't want that. They want some sort of room tone. They have very strict standards. If they have whole pages of audio standards for submitting audiobooks, I think it's a 60 dB signal-to-noise ratio for the noise floor, and if you get over 60 dB, but you cannot get to zero or they will knock it back out to you. So, what they want is something listenable, and the idea of absolutely nothing behind a voice, particularly people try to achieve that by putting algorithms in there to whenever they stop the voice for a second, they're just going to crush it to zero. And then all of a sudden, what you find out is that same engineer, and I put that in quotes because it's typically somebody who's a narrator trying to do their own engineering, they'll put compression on and then all of a sudden, before every time you deliver a line, the noise floor comes back up and then drops down to zero to nothing. And I think that's as distracting as anything else. So that's why they have all those standards for how to actually engineer an audiobook to pass quality control. And every book that goes out into the big services, at least, has to go through that quality control system. Courtney?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Bill, because you do a lot of these audiobook recordings. I'll add to JJ's question here a little bit.
Sure.
Do you find that if you're doing a situation where the book takes you to different environments, like a big hall or a cave or a small venue or inside a car, first of all, do you prepare the audio tracks or do you send them to the publisher and they do all the post-production mixing if you're trying to create an ambiance or background sounds or an acoustical environment for the location? Do they do all that, or do you do that when you submit the recording? Do you do all the editing and the submission where you're maybe applying sound effects or environmental sounds, et cetera, for each individual?
We're going back to our favorite answer. It depends. And there's a lot of different tiers of production in the audiobook world. There are also different approaches. For example, most audiobooks traditionally have been solo voice, single narrator. Some of them that come through the big houses, if you have a bestseller, if you're a huge author, if you're one of those people who sells 1 million books a year, they're going to hire a narrator. They're going to probably put them in a studio. They're going to take care of all the engineering. They're going to take care of all the mastering. Your job is just to be the performer, period. End of story. Walk away at the end of every day. They're going to fix everything else. Increasingly over the past 10 years, they've moved away from that, and they're having people contract. They consider their narrators the producer of record. And so your responsibility is to prepare everything and turn it in a turnkey fashion that they can literally just make an audiobook out of. Now, on top of that, there are different types. There's solo narration, which most of them still are. There's an increasing tendency toward what they call duets or dual narrations. And those are circumstances where two people, perhaps male and female announcer or narrator, will take chapters. And so if this chapter is the point of view of the female protagonist, the woman will read that portion. And then when you switch to the point of view of the male protagonist, it'll be the male voice. Then the next level above that is a duet performance where those two characters will appear in the same scenes, and there will be one of the performers will read the narrative stuff, but the individual actors will do those two things. And then you get to the next level on top of that, which is a fully produced audio drama where you're casting each individual voice for the characters. In that case, directly to your question, Courtney, increasingly, we're seeing these done as radio dramas and plays, and there is a complex background with sound effects and music, and that idea of changing the tonality of the narration to fit the character is rampant in the audio drama kind of ways. And I've even done it. There was a lot of talk on the boards about not getting too far into the weeds with special effects, but I find it kind of brings things alive to me. So when I had a character who was on a CB radio or something like that, I would go ahead and apply a filter to that. And I didn't think it hurt the immersion in there to hear that, this is the helicopter pilot talking to the ground station. And I want that to sound a little different than just the standard narration. Some traditional narrators say, no, you just do that through the acting and the performance. You perform like the major back talking to the pilot, and you shouldn't do anything to the sound at all. I respect that. I just don't necessarily agree with it, mostly because so much listening is done now in RPGs, role-playing games, and the rest of the world where you've got all sorts of sound effects and all sorts of performance styles. And I think the audience of modern listeners is really interested in and forgiving of not doing it the old traditional, this is just a solo voice on tape acting everything. And so now that I've said just that, I will say I'm listening right now to a book that is so brilliantly done by a solo voice performer that I can't imagine listening to it any other way. So, now we're back to it depends. It depends on the talent of the person doing the work, and it depends on what the author and the producer of the work decide is best for this work. Next question.
Next one comes in from Jason Wise in Orlando, Florida. Jason asks, can you suggest a 360 camera that has an HDMI output to allow a 16:9 area of interest output to pan and scan in real time? This is for a live event.
Ronnie Hofsway, can you help?
Yeah, if you asked me 3 or 4 years ago, I would probably suggest something coming from Insta360, like the Pro series of 6Ks and 8K cameras. But I'm not sure I would do that nowadays. I would be thinking really hard why I would shoot something with a semi-professional 360 camera and then digital extract 16:9 image out of that in a live production. I would much rather see that you got a really high quality PD set camera. I think the area where we use the Insta360s or 360 cameras is kind of over now. I would look into more, if I was going with something new and cool, I would go with the 3D cameras from Blackmagic, or even just use an iPhone with on the vertical. So I'm not sure if I would actually suggest you get a 360 camera nowadays. I'm of course, I've been using 360 cameras for ages, and yeah, I'm over it.
I love it. Next question.
Next one comes in from J.J. McKenna in Santa Venetia, California. What is a preferable format for audiobooks within the accessibility community? And are there controls that might make listening to audiobooks more available for note-taking with voice tools?
Well, I'm certainly not an expert about this. I will know that I have, having done them, there is a lot of concern among the entire audiobook production and industry about what they are doing. And what they're doing is giving books to the world that can be heard instead of seen, which means that it's a massive resource for everyone with any kind of print impairment across the world. It's also turned out to be something that people just enjoy if they have no impairment in that area at all. I mean, a lot of people, and I'm one of them, I just prefer being able to listen to a performance of a book rather than sitting down and looking at it and reading it. And this is somebody... I've read books all my life, and I had probably 1,000 books in my personal library before I sold them all when I moved decades ago. But this is, you're trying to get ideas across. That is the function of most books, one way or another. And any way you can make that positive an experience for any human being, they're going to work at making that happen. And Harshid raised his hand, and thankfully, because Harshid, you knows more about this than I do.
Appreciate it, Bill. And what I feel is with accessibility and audiobooks, the word audiobooks to me sounds like it's an actual human reading a book, but you could get ebooks that has text-to-speech engines. So when it comes to the note-taking aspect, there are tools, especially for college textbooks and such, that they use like Bookshare, or I can't think of the other name, but you could stop the play pause and while it's recording, or while it's playing, and it has little tools where you could write bookmarks and comments and pretty much study like you were studying any textbook, but having that alternative text. However, with the audiobook scene, I mean, it's interesting because there are some graphics novels and stuff like that give you the sound effects and all that. I would say good note-taking piece there would just be open up Google Keep or Apple Notes. And let's say if there was a word or two that you wanted to define or look up, I would just start voicing it while I'm listening to, let's say, audiobooks off of an external speaker. So you're still having that interaction where you may not be highlighting actual text in a textbook or even just putting bunny ears or what have you on a physical book. However, I think that with audiobooks or to convert them into a text-to-speech type of ebook, you have more flexibility, whereas audiobooks, you're basically trying to hone in on listening to the art of how they're producing that book.
Great comments, and thank you. Next question.
This one comes in from Vieira, Florida. Andy Kokendorfer asks, what is black balance on a camera?
We're delving into the world of the pedestal level. Courtney Gooden, dive into it.
Well, black balance, you might wonder, why would you need to black balance a camera? Black is black. Well, not necessarily. Typically on a camera that has a black balance on it, it will have an iris in the actual lens, and it will, when you hit black balance, it'll close that iris completely closed. And then it takes a measurement of the signal level from each pixel that is coming out of the sensor. And this gives the sensor a black point to shoot for, and it'll average out the signal levels coming from all of those individual pixels when it's in the dark. So that helps remove the noise, and it minimizes the noise, the self-noise of that sensor itself. So black balance gives you a good signal level for black coming out of each individual pixel transistor that samples each individual pixel in your image sensor. So it helps. It's there to help you reduce noise and get you the optimum level, and to tell any computational photography that's happening upstream from the sensor what the absolute black level will be coming out of that sensor.
Ronnie Hossoy.
Yeah, I knew Courtney would have the good answer for this. I'm just adding to that. Most consumer and semi-professional cameras does not have this functionality. This is a function that is mostly seen on very high quality cinema cameras and high quality and expensive studio cameras, etc. So if you have a normal camera, you shouldn't even see this as a menu item. And for most of the DSLRs and compact camera that are being used in high numbers by normal people or doing normal small budget productions, this functionality is done automatically inside the camera, so you don't even have to think of it.
There you go. Next question.
This one comes in from Harshit Trivedi in Daytona Beach, Florida. Whose end-user license agreement do you trust in modern-day setups? Photoshop, GIMP, or any of the other graphics software?
Nobody raised their hands. I think that might be because nobody trusts anything anymore. I don't. It's really, EULAs are funny because all the lawyers put them in everything, and I'm not sure if 0.001% of them are ever looked at after the lawyers write them. I think we've all gotten used to just clicking OK, even though you're probably giving away the rights to 20 generations of progeny when you sign the darn thing or use the product. Courtney, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, usually these are written by lawyers, and these are a lot of time boilerplate stuff. It's a CYA situation that the lawyers put in there just in case they're going to come up with a situation where they happen to use, a portion of your photography in some of their advertising. They stick that clause in there that says they have the right to use anything that you shoot or that you edit in Photoshop and for whatever use they deem necessary. Most of the time, you won't have to challenge them on this. You might be able to, if you get into a really sticky situation that's worth a whole lot of money, you might want to hire a lawyer to try and bust their end-user license agreement or say that it's, too strict or, too onerous or beyond the pale of what should be in an end-user license agreement. But generally, nobody ever reads them. Nobody ever needs to read them usually because I wouldn't worry too much about them, sending all your photographs to some foreign country for use in some, nefarious situation.
Harshid.
So where I wanted to come in with some of that is like Epidemic Sound for Sound. If you stop paying a subscription, they could take that piece away from you. So when it comes to graphics, though, Photoshop has changed. There's their talk in certain months or years with their EULA, and it just feels like it's become harder to find a graphics product that you could go ahead and make what you want to make, and if it becomes commercial, then will it be okay for you to use that? Is it okay use case? So just a thought. Thank you guys.
And the final word goes to Ryan Thomas in the chat today. He says, if you want to see something funny, put a EULA into Gemini or Claude and have it summarize it for you. I haven't tried that, but it'll be my fun little project for the rest of the day. Hey, thank you all for being here. Thank you for helping us make this show happen every single day. So many people do so much good work on this, particularly our three core constituencies, and that is first and foremost the panelists who come here every day and freely pass out their expertise. This show would not be able to be done with the panelists not showing up. To the producers, where everything begins and ends here, that's the people who put the questions into the show. We are here only to answer your questions, so thank you to producers for doing that. And to our amazing back-end crew, the people who are silently pushing buttons and working in committees and doing an amazing amount of work to keep this show on the rails every time. We really, truly appreciate your help and efforts, too. Stats today for the clock traversal, if we'd gone around to get these answers from people, it would have been a 45,000-mile trip. That's 72,000 kilometers, 356 million bananas for scale. We'll be right back here again tomorrow doing the same thing. Thanks for watching. And or listening, I should say, since some people do just listen.
Yes. All right.
But
They're all out. They're all out setting their black belts. Yeah.
I was going to bring up pedestal level, which we used to have to worry about in broadcast in the old days.
Yeah, with tube type cameras. Yes.
I'll never forget being able to get from 7.5 IRE down to 0, and what a change that made, and how all my video looked. I was like, oh, thank you. Thank
Bill,
you.
is
So
it a
Then the
monoprice
temperature in the
monopod?
venue changed.
yeah.
Hey, Bill, would you say monoprice monopod? Is that what you're kind of describing with?
No, I got an Amazon Basics monopod. I don't know if it's within hand's reach of me or not. It is the cheapest thing. I have a little snap holder for my camera on top. The two things together weigh